language that would have been spoken back in the most ancient times that we've got any trace of, believe it or not, would have been an ancient form of...
So all this area, there used to be pagans, there used to be a lot of the Neolithic people. Can you tell us about some of the culture of these people and what they did when they were here?
Well, I mean, like everywhere really, the landscape is a sort of what's quite finely called a palimpsest, you know, sort of like a canvas that gets wiped clean every so often and replaced with another picture, you know. And the farthest back that we can go with any certainty around here is back to the Neolithic, the New Stone Age, when the first farmers came, really.
So how long ago was the Neolithic period?
Talking about 3,500 BC, so 5,500 years ago, yeah, so
Right,
long time.
Wow.
And we've got traces of a chambered tomb up on Hurst Hill, just across the moor from here.
Yeah.
Beyond that, just about on the edge of the same moor, is a Bronze Age barrow, a round sort of tumulus, a burial mound basically, and that will date from around about 1,500 years later.
Wow.
It's about 2000 BC.
So is that Sugarloaf?
That's locally always known as the Sugarloaf,
Okay.
back through my dad's, my grandparents and so on's generation,
Yeah.
but always noted on the Ordnance Survey as Round Loaf. Now, I don't know where that kind of came from,
Yeah.
but colloquially, everyone's
Yeah.
always called it the Sugarloaf. Yeah, I mean, the language that would have been spoken back in the most ancient times that we've got any trace of, believe it or not, would have been an ancient form of Welsh.
Okay.
Even back as far as the Neolithic, many renowned archaeologists of note have speculated that the roots of what still survive as a Celtic language in Wales, Scotland, Brittany, in northern France, little traces here and there down the Atlantic seaboard, and of course in Cornwall, have their roots right back into the Neolithic,
The
and
Neolithic
possibly
people
beyond.
talked.
Some kind of guttural
Okay.
language that would possibly, if only by sound and the odd sort
Really?
of word,
And that's
be
still
recognised by
continued
a modern Welshman.
Wow.
When the Romans
Fantastic.
came in 43 AD,
Yeah.
long time after that period, they would have, the Britons, the
Yeah.
Brythonic people as history records them,
So this is
would have been...
St. Speed, who written about the
That's
Britons,
a
is that
little
right?
bit. That's right. That's he recorded their exploits and the Roman invasion.
Like-
But he came from later on. He
Okay.
was from the period of Roman settlement through into Anglo-Saxon
He
settlement.
talked about King Arthur, didn't he? and
He
the
did.
mythology.
Yeah. I mean, Arthur's a whole story in his own
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
We'll go on
We
to
can
that
come back
another
to him.
time.
That's right. Yeah. But the accents that survive around here, I don't think probably have too much to do with those peoples. Those peoples have sort of, kind of slowly sort of diluted away, and you find them, as I say, in the western hinterlands, basically.
Okay.
Our accents and possibly our, kind of ready to call a spade sort of attitude in the northwest has an awful lot more to do with the Anglo-Saxons, and then an awful lot more to do with the Vikings. Our ready spirit, our quickness to laugh, and equal quickness to shout, and you might even refer to it as a sort of a boisterous nature. Comes very much from those guys who jumped off the boats and hit the ground running.
So
lots of trace of those guys around, particularly in place names, various aspects.
So we have very similar. Well, the Anglo-Saxons, they had very similar gods to the Vikings. Is that correct?
They did.
Was
It's
there Nordic
kind of because they came from the same geographic locations, northern Germany, Scandinavia,
which were the Germanic people.
That's right. They the Vikings, who were sort of a 300-year later culture of similar peoples from similar regions, of course held the same deities, but slightly adapted them in a slightly more direct way than the Romans adapted the Greek gods.
So there was different names, weren't there, for like
Poseidon,
well.
Poseidon became Neptune and so on and so forth. That's right.
Okay, fantastic. So Up at Hurst Hill, they've
Yeah.
excavated there, and also at Sugar Hill, round North.
Yeah.
They've excavated them place. So, what are the oldest things that they've found?
Well, the
there?
Neolithic passage grave on
Okay.
Hurst Hill, called Pike Stones,
Yeah.
that was excavated in the 1950s, and then again, cursorily in 1966, I do believe.
So is the Pike Stones?
But
the
that
one
is
here?
Neolithic. That is from 3.5, thereabouts 3,000 years ago. It was kind of mistakenly referred to. It has been in history as the Temple of Anlaf the Heathen.
Okay.
Now, Anlaf
Okay.
is a name that lends its core to Anglesark. Anlaf's Ark.
Yeah. So Anglo-Saxons is not far from here.
That's right, just across the moor. Just across the moor.
Yeah. Just probably about a mile.
We're talking a mile from
Yeah.
where we're actually located in the story here. Anlaf, a fairly common as a version of Olaf in
Olaf,
later
yeah.
times, you know. It was a
From what I
fairly common place name, but people's names don't get attributed to a spot for no good reason.
Yeah.
It's unlikely that it's going to be any old Anlaf.
So I've known Anglo-Saxons as Annos Hill Pasture originally.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Well, it's not so much correct as sort of like it's one version of the probable truth, you know. Before there was official sort of, you know, kind of council written records, you know,
Yeah.
rubber stamped and so on,
Yeah.
people used to approximate things, you know, and a surname might be sort of approximated, decrepitated, or, you know, sort of twisted and turned.
Yeah.
Anulf is one version of it. Anlaf is a far more common one. Olaf.
Okay.
There are
Right,
differences
okay.
between the Danish and the Norwegian
okay.
nomenclature for the same name,
Okay.
you know.
So do they know where Anulf or Anlaf came from? What I've read
Well-
online is that he was in Ireland. And
That's right.
There was a war.
That's right. That's right.
And when the Vikings got kicked out of Ireland,
Yeah.
he came over to Anglo-Saxons and
Yeah.
then built this hill pasture.
Well, yeah, there were quite a few Anlafs and Olafs in Norse history per se, but the Anlaf in question, as you say, came from what history refers to as the Irish Vikings. They are from that illustrious group of people that were set up by Ragnar Lodbrok, you know, on the famous TV series. Ivor the Boneless,
Yep.
various reasons for him being called that. We'll go into that maybe at some other point. Anlaf Sitricson, son of Sitric,
Yep.
who was ruler of Dublin.
Yep.
It's said that he bought the rulership of Dublin when the Norwegian Vikings, these are Danish Vikings we're talking about, abandoned Dublin, and he basically bought the rulership of Dublin from Olaf the White. Where he cleared off to, I'm not quite sure, but he sure did. He cleared off and left the rulership to Ivor the Boneless's consorts and descendants.
So the Vikings at this point had conquered Ireland.
Not totally, but
Okay.
they got a real stronghold in Dublin, and that remained a real quite kind of significant seat. And it ended up with them ruling the whole mass of land between York, which in those days was the capital of Northumbria, the kingdom, and Dublin. So it's a huge swathe of land, you know.
So
Other,
kind of the battle was from east to west, other than north to south.
that's right, that's right.
Yeah.
There are other places that are known to have taken the name from Anlaf Sitricson.
Yeah.
Anlaby, right out on the east coast, maybe where he used to nip off to go back home and see his mum.
Right,
Not too sure. And they say Anglesea, you know, quite,
right.
you know, sort of significantly.
Yeah,
Anglesark somewhere in the middle,
Yep.
it kind of makes sense, you know. Anlaf's Arg. Arg, like you find Goosner, Grimsner, it means literally a shieling, a farm pasture, a settlement.
Okay.
And when you look around these parts of Lancashire, it's a pretty fine place to settle.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
maybe while you're getting stores together, and maybe while you're sort of plotting your route back to Ireland.
So would it have been quite a safe place?
I think so. Yeah.
Wasn't much of a
It would have been quite
population.
marshy in those days.
Yeah.
The Romans had been here significantly, as we say. The ancient Neolithic and Bronze Age people had established themselves, but still pretty sparsely populated.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the Romans were here then in what was it, like
The
zero?
Romans came here in 43 AD. and they left here officially in 410 AD.
And that's when the Anglo-Saxons came in after.
The Anglo-Saxons had been drifting across for about 100 years before the Romans went, from the early 300s to the early 400s. So the last 100 years of Roman tenure here was not as strong as it could be. Certainly the last 50 years, kind of hardly counted really, you know. And people like to state that the Romans boldly ruled Britain for 400 years. Well, the first 100 years was not an easy battle because we didn't bloody want them here, did we? You know what I mean? And the last 100 years shows us that we were still trying to get rid of them, and so we did, you know.